And welcome into this week's edition of The Locker Room with Gerhard. I'm Chase. Great show lined up for you today. We have a great one-on-one interview with Brett Holmes coming up a little bit later on. But Gerhard, let's dive right into the Super Bowl this past weekend. Didn't go as well as a lot of people thought it would.
Yeah, the Super Bowl 50, and there was a lot of hype and a lot of fanfare coming with it. You had all the Super Bowl MVPs from the past, and it had all this fanfare and all this hype with it. And I think from a normal perspective, the game was a defensive game, and 9 times out of 10, most people don't like defensive games. They like offensive games. They like games with a lot of drama and a lot of intrigue, and I think you got that late in the game. But what you saw was just a dominating Denver defense. I mean, John Elway, and give him a lot of credit for putting together this team. He stacked it up on the defensive side. And you have Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware and Aqib Talib and a lot of these guys and Chris Harris Jr. I just think that on its surface, it wasn't the sexy kind of game that we're used to seeing in Super Bowls like we did last year with the Seahawks and the Patriots. But it was a solid game. It was definitely a okay game if you're an NFL football fan.
We saw Peyton Manning, quarterback for the Denver Broncos, win the Super Bowl. Did we see his last game, Gerhard?
I think so. I mean, he's kind of been on the edge really ever since the game was over with. But I just think that he looks into his front office and he sees his boss, and it's John Elway. And John Elway did the exact same thing. He ended his career. He was late in his career. At the end of his career, Terrell Davis carried him, into that Super Bowl championship. The end of Peyton Manning's career seems like the defense took him to a world championship. He now has 2 world titles. He has lots of business ventures. One of the things about Peyton Manning, he is super, super smart when it comes to business, when it comes to sponsorships. And then also there's talk that he could be one of the front office guys, the next front office guys with the Tennessee Titans. So if that opens up, now you have another avenue for him to still be in the competitive side of it. I just think that he knows his arm isn't what it used to be, and you don't get better at 38 and 39 years old. You might as well leave on top.
We'll talk a little bit more about Cam Newton a little bit later on, but let's talk about him in the game. What did you see from him? I know the Broncos defense was outstanding.
Right.
What else could he have done, though, to maybe have a better game?
I think that you said it. I think the Broncos defense was really that good, but he just looked tight. He looked nervous at the very beginning. You saw at the beginning of the game, Peyton Manning was given easy throws down the middle of the field to his tight end. Just some nice, easy dump passes just to get him comfortable in the moment. And I think that Carolina, for too many times, especially in the first half, just kept going long, kept going for that deep shot. And that was okay a little bit later in the game, but I just think that Cam never got his feet settled. And then you add that to one of the best defenses we've seen in the last 20 or so years. I just think that it was just a perfect mixture for the Denver defense going into the game, and I don't think Mike Shula really helped him out all that much. And credit Mike Shula, he did say that we didn't come up with enough of a game plan to get Cam settled in. And those two usually, for all the season, they've been on the same page, especially in the first half of games. They weren't on Sunday.
Is this just the start of the Broncos for a while?
No, I think kind of the opposite. I think that they might be done because they have lots and lots of roster moves to think about over the next few years. Obviously, Peyton Manning coming up first, but Von Miller is a free agent. DeMarcus Ware is a free agent. They spent a lot of money on this defense, and now the situation is, do you want to stay old for another year and risk just being a little too old next year and then still spending a lot of money and maybe going over and paying a luxury tax? Or do you want to just go young on that defensive side? And then if you want to go young, you have to go a little bit cheaper, and cheaper is not as good. And if you don't have Peyton Manning there on the other side, I just think that for Denver, we've seen the max of what this team can do. And I think a lot of these pieces won't be in Denver uniforms next year.
All right, let's move over to college basketball now. Let's talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's been really an up and down year for the Tide so far this year.
Yeah, it's been puzzling. I mean, you look at games like the Dayton game where they got blown off the court 80-48 in a midweek game, and then they've been on a 2 or 3 game winning streak, and they have huge games coming up. I mean, and they beat South Carolina at home, and then they lost to South Carolina on the road. I just think one of the things that's really helping them out is their guard play between Retno Basahan and Riley Norris, the kid from Albertville. I mean, that's an inside-outside duo that's been great for them. And so whenever you have good guard play, especially in college basketball, it can really help you out, especially come March.
Retno Basahan's had a heck of a season so far for Alabama. He's got the SEC Player of the Week twice this year, with his first time that's happened since 04 and 05. We're seeing Avery Johnson's really come in here, I think, and turn this around. Are we going to be seeing more of this?
I think so. I think that he changed the culture there, and one of the great things that any head coach can ask for, I don't care if you're a baseball head coach, you want a starting pitcher. If you're a basketball head coach, you want a starting point guard. If you're a football head coach, you want to walk in with a good quarterback. He walked in with a great point guard. This is a guy that's been there. He's been a senior. He's been a leader. And he just took Avery Johnson's entire philosophy and he embraced it with open arms. And that's really fed off to the entire team. And he's a guy that's a great student, and he's got a very, very tough physical aspect. He doesn't have a pretty game, so to speak, but he's built big, and he's got a very, very solid understanding of what Avery Johnson wants to do. So he's an extension of Avery Johnson on the court. And so now in his first year, he's getting a lot of what he needed out of Rhett Nobasahan.
Well, here's Avery Johnson on Rhett Nobasahan.
I just like how my guys have fun. They work hard. We have a guy, who would have ever thought in June we would have somebody that would win SEC Player of the Week twice. If you'd have told me that, I would have ran from here to Birmingham, all right, barefoot, all right.
And now let's talk about the Auburn Tigers, Gerhard. Another roller coaster of a season.
Yeah, it's been a rough road here, especially late. Bruce Pearl did a great job on the recruiting trail and got a lot of top guys, and then they had a lot of their guards back. They had Kareem Canty, who you're seeing right here. They had Simeon Bowers. They had a lot of talent back mixed in with some of the guys that he signed. And they just haven't, they meshed at the beginning of the season, but here lately they've had discipline issues. I mean, Bruce Pearl, to his credit, has had to sit Simeon Bowers as one of the best players on his team. The fourth leading scorer in the SEC is Kareem Canty. He's right now serving a suspension. Right. He's in the middle of a suspension, and we have no idea when he will get back on the court. And they suffered a huge, embarrassing loss to Tennessee. And it's a situation with Bruce Pearl where I think that he's now in a position where he understands it has to be my way or the highway now. And you can't let some of the top players slide through and then have your new guys fit in the way you want them to. So it might just be the growing pains of having to take over a team that's got some frustrations and has got some I wouldn't say problem guys, because to a man everybody says that guys like Simeon Bowers, they're not bad guys. They're just for some reason frustrated or whatever, and Bruce Pearl's having to do what he has to do in order to create some discipline there. But with Kareem Canty and Simeon Bowers, it's just the team goes as their leaders go. Those are the leaders, and so far Auburn has lost 6 in a row, and that's because their leaders haven't done what they needed to do to step up.
Well, we'll be keeping up with all this college basketball over the next little while, as March Madness will be beginning soon. Stay here on the Locker Room, and we'll keep you updated with that. We're going to grab our first timeout. When we come back, we go one-on-one with Brett Holmes. Stay with us. Welcome back into the Locker Room, and we are here with Mumford native, Donahoe graduate Brett Holmes, who's been making his rounds in auto racing. And Brett, you've been at it a while. What got you started in racing?
My dad did it he started before I was born, around his mid-20s, and I was kind of born into it. I grew up going to the racetrack, mainly at Talladega Short Track. He raced dirt late models, and I eventually just decided one day that I wanted to do it, and so at 8 years old I started out in go-karts.
When did you really know that this could be a future for you?
Well, when we started doing go-karts, I thought it was just a hobby then. It was just something I did after school on a Friday night, and just, I thought it was really fun and really cool. But when we started moving up to bigger cars and dirt late models and then move on to asphalt, that's when it really opened my eyes and thought I could have a really good career in this.
You mentioned your dad racing. How much help is that, having him around?
It's a little nerve-wracking sometimes because he was once a driver, so he knows, a lot of things that happen in my position. So he's a little hard on me, but it really does help, having somebody there that knows a lot of that stuff.
You've raced dirt track, now you're in ARCA. What's the major difference in going from dirt to asphalt?
The driving style and the cars are completely different, and that was the hardest transition from dirt to asphalt to do, and that's why we raced late models a little bit before we're starting out in the ARCA series. But it was definitely really fun. I'm glad I started out in dirt. I think it made me a better driver for later down the road.
You're 18 years old and already starting all this. You're also a student at Auburn. How do you handle all this?
It's definitely pretty stressing. I mean, I've got classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I commute back and forth for weekends for racing. So I still keep up, but it's definitely pretty tough. Yeah.
We in your garage right here see all these cars. Talk about some differences in the cars, your ARCA cars, your dirt cars, and how y'all handle this, kind of the day-by-day process of working on these cars?
Well, definitely it's a lot different from dirt to asphalt. I mean, there's not really many parts so we could transition to use over into the asphalt cars. But I needed even more labor to do all of this in asphalt. It takes so much more help, and the cars, I mean, they weigh differently. They're different motors. They're so much different in the setup work. So we definitely had to have some new help come on board for this.
You were part of a team up in North Carolina for a while. You came back down here. Talk about kind of starting your own team.
Well, yeah, that was a driver development program I went through just because that was my first year out of dirt late model, and it was a tough transition. And that year I learned so much, and my learning curve got a big learning curve from that. And we decided we were well off enough now to do it on our own, so we got our own help, hired some other guys, and started racing out of our shop and had more success. So.
How many people do you have to have part of your program to be a successful driver?
Well, we have 2 full-time guys that work at the shop through the week, and they also go to the track with us on the weekend. But we take about 4 to 5 people to the track with us. It definitely takes a lot more people than what it used to in the go-kart days. But these guys work their tails off on what we do and trying to make this thing work.
Now you'll be racing 7 races in the ARCA series this year. Talk about kind of approaching the ARCA season and what your expectations are.
It's definitely pretty nerve-wracking. I mean, I know we bought equipment from GMS this past year, and they won the ARCA championship last year. So I definitely have good people and good equipment around me. So it's kind of left up to me as far as performance goes, to do well. But we'll be racing at Nashville, Talladega, Toledo, Lucas Oil, Salem, Berlin, and Winchester this year in ARCA, and a lot of those races will be on TV, and especially at Talladega. Me growing up and watching races at the Super Speedway, that's definitely putting a lot of pressure on me, and being from here, I mean, I'll definitely have a lot of friends and family from here watching.
You went up a couple weeks ago to Daytona to practice. What was that like getting to race on the Speedway at Daytona?
That was very exciting. I mean, definitely eye-opening. I mean, getting to race there, there's been so much history, and a lot of the NASCAR greats have gotten to go there. And, we ended up 3rd on the charts on the last day. So we did definitely really good, and we're definitely proud of that. But I think that's a good intro for when we go to Talladega Superspeedway.
That's my next question. What did you see at Daytona that will prepare you for the next Superspeedway?
The definitely drafting was the biggest thing to get used to. I mean, I've never had to do anything like that, and the speeds. I mean, we're going 190 miles per hour, so that's something to get used to, and doing that every lap and not lifting. And I got to get used to that for Talladega, but that'll be definitely pretty fun.
Brett, talk about kind of the business side of it, going from dirt track to ARCA, the business standpoint of this.
Well, that's what we started out in, and, definitely transitioning over to asphalt was huge. We had never done anything like that before, so my dad had to gain a lot of help. We hired a few other guys, Brian Casey, Jim Barfield, Jeff Powell, a few other guys that already had experience in this and had to build connections and a network to the asphalt world to do this, and it definitely takes a lot of help and connections to get through this.
And there you see the ARCA races that Brett Holmes will be racing in starting April 9th in Nashville, and then he'll be right here in Talladega Superspeedway April 29th. On May 22nd, he'll be in Toledo, Ohio, and then on July 22nd, he will be at the Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, August 6th in Berlin, September 10th in Salem, Indiana, and October 4th in Kansas City. And there you see the race at Talladega, Indianapolis, and Kansas City will all be televised on Fox Sports 1. And Gerhard, we got to spend a little time with him when we were doing this interview the other day. Amazing driver and really an amazing kid.
Yeah, he's a really humble guy, and he's 18 years old. He's learned so much over the last 10 years. He's been in a car for 10 years. He's put probably more time than most adults have behind the wheel. But one of the things about him is his trajectory is just so high. I mean, he's been everywhere from the dirt track, the go-kart, and he's dominated competition. He's not just moving up just because he can. He's moving up because he's winning, and he's winning big. And last year he was the Rookie of the Year in the All-Star Series. And one of the caveats about his ARCA Series schedule this year is that he's racing in 7 races, and it's not enough to make him qualify for Rookie of the Year. So he's basically getting 2 rookie seasons, which is good for him because this year kind of serves as a stepping stone for next year. And so that way next year is not a complete blur whenever he comes in and races a full ARCA schedule. But I hope that for everybody else that he continues his journey, and hopefully we'll see him racing on Sundays in sprint car.
Yeah, and he's got good family support too. Comes from a good family, and that's so important at a young age while a young man is growing up and maturing and facing a lot of the challenges that come with what he's trying to do. To have that good family support and that grounding while they grow up and hopefully succeed and make a career out of this. I think that's very important too.
We'll be looking forward to see Brett Holmes out throughout his racing career, and we'll keep you updated about him here on TV 24. We're going to grab another timeout. When we come back, it's the Locker Room Roundtable, so stay with us.
I've been on record to say I'm a sore loser. Who likes to lose? You show me a good loser, and I'm going to show you a loser. You know what I'm saying? I'm not here to it's not a popularity contest. You know what I'm saying? I'm here to win football games.
That was Cam Newton this week discussing this right here. Right after the Super Bowl on Sunday night, the press conference, he gets up and walks out of the room. And guys, you know, that wasn't the only thing that happened in that game that really ticked people off about Cam.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of annoyed, disappointed, unimpressed with Cam's actions here lately, and I just think that was the back end of it. And a lot of people will point to the fumble when they were down by one possession, and it was third down, and if they would have picked it up, it would have been fourth down. And if anything, they could have punted, and their defense might have held and got a position to do it late. When they didn't recover that fumble, the game was over. Mm-hmm. I just think that. What we saw a lot with Cam this year is a lot of what we've seen in the previous 4 years of him as quarterback of an average, mediocre team. We kind of saw him pout. We saw him hang his head. But I credit him for not being fake in that moment and saying that I'm not a good loser. And he just knows himself that way. And there's other people who aren't good losers in that respect. And if he sees himself that way, then he can be willing to put himself out there for the criticism that will soon follow.
Well, from my take, the press conference didn't bother me a bit. What he said yesterday didn't bother me. None of that bothered me. I mean, he just lost the Super Bowl. All these media just, they're throwing out all these crazy questions. None of that bothers me. But how in the world on that play on the fumble you don't attack that football? And his excuse of, well, my leg was at an angle, I was so close. How do you think about all that in that quick?
Right.
That tells me that when he was on the field, he was thinking about himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your natural instinct of a competitive football player in the Super Bowl is, oh, the ball's loose, boom, I'm going after it. Not, let me see, I'm this far, and if I do it,
Right.
I don't really understand that one.
Yeah, and I think that he got hit a bunch of times. He got hit, sacked 6 times in the game and had 2 forced fumbles. I just think he was tired of getting hit by that defense.
Yeah. Well, another player in the NFL that's been in the news a lot, especially lately, Johnny Manziel. What is his future in the NFL?
What is his future, first of all, for himself? I don't know if he has much of a future in the NFL. It's not right now. Mm-hmm. And with all the really disturbing reports that have come out, especially with him and his girlfriend, and then his dad coming out and saying what he did about Johnny won't see his 24th birthday. I mean, things like this, the football ceases to be important. It's just let's get this kid some help, and hopefully they will be. And we're seeing some of the things that Johnny was able to do at Texas A&M. Both quarterbacks left. One of the quarterbacks said that error from Johnny Manziel, that entitlement era still hasn't left Texas A&M. I just think that he's toxic right now, no matter where he goes. And so the key for everybody in the NFL, hands off. The key for Johnny Manziel, hands on a situation.
Yeah, he's obviously got issues that could totally derail any chance at his NFL career. He's already got a couple of strikes against him now. But like Gerhard said, it makes you wonder about what was going on at Texas A&M to kind of enable him to behave and feel entitled, and he can above the law, kind of, so to speak. I don't know, not to criticize too much their football program, but it makes you wonder what was going on when he was in college there.
Right.
Well, let's talk some college football now. Ole Miss cited with 13 of 28 rules violations from the NCAA. Is this going to do anything to recruiting for Ole Miss?
Well, it depends on the nature of the violations. I think as they stand right now, it shouldn't have that big of an impact. But let one of these big ones drop through, and we'll see, because we've seen the way the NCAA has been a little different on these situations. And you can point to some of these being under the Houston Nutt era, and we'll see how they all pan out. But I think everybody could say who follows recruiting that Ole Miss's recruiting has been a little eyebrow raising over the last few years. So you just kind of hope one of these big dominoes don't fall.
I love the saying, if you're landing punches above your weight class, you have to ask yourself why. And there's been a lot of punches Ole Miss has been landing above their weight class in recruiting that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Not saying they cheated, But obviously there's something going on with these allegations. They found some stuff, and it just makes
Right.
you wonder if that's the old iceberg analogy, if there's a lot more underneath the surface that we may not know about or may not ever know about, but
Right.
it makes you wonder.
And now back to the Super Bowl, guys. Aqib Talib, his face mask call, he says it is intentional. The NFL considering a suspension for him now. Is this an appropriate punishment?
I think so. It looked dirty. It was dirty in the hindsight of everything that he did beforehand, and he was just. It's one of those situations where if under any other circumstance, maybe under any other player in that game, maybe not. You let it go, give him a nice fine, and let him enjoy the rest of his offseason. I just think that it was dirty in the moment, and it was dirty preceding all the things that he did in the first half. And he had two unsportsmanlike penalties beforehand. It was a situation in that game where he wanted a mental edge over Carolina. And I think they ended up getting it. But you just can't have that in football. If you want to preach player safety, you can't have that and him say it's intentional and him not serve some kind of suspension on the back end of it. I think the NFL definitely should do something.
Well, you know, if you'd have gone into that game and said that there'd be a defensive back in that game, have those penalties, an intentional face mask, and possibly wind up getting in trouble with the NFL, you'd have said Josh Norman. So he kind of he made Josh Norman look lame in the game.
Right.
But he clearly had something going on with him in the game. There was a lot of dumb mistakes, penalties, and so I don't know what was going on with him, but this would be a fitting ending to it. And if he admitted it, might as well slap the guy.
Yeah.
All right, well, that'll do it for this week's edition of The Locker Room. And we want to remind you, though, you can check out all of our shows on demand at TV24.tv. Also, check us out on Facebook. Hit the like button on the Locker Room page, and we're on Twitter at The Locker Room 24. We'll see you next week right here in The Locker Room.